Yeah, this is really probably one of the better applications I've seen as far as recording. This is just going to be audio at this particular time, till I figure out how to work everything. I'm just going to be fooling around, have some fun, and I really want to just try to stay focused on some of the things that I guess I get excited about. Looking for an audience, I guess, to people who are concerned about the same thing that I'm concerned about. And when I look at the universe, the heavens, the universe, some of the activities, some of the things that's going on this planet. Look at the Bible and you say, okay, well, that's all well and good, but then I look at history, and even the fact that I was born in 1959, and that was during the Civil Rights era, and we have video and pictures showing a group of people who were very, very mean, and I wanted to know, what makes people act like that? So I started studying history, and I was studying accounting back in 1980, and I guess I'm going to tell my life story a little bit, give a little background. But like I said, being born in 1959, I was born in a particular era in this particular continent, and I remember some of the things they used to say about history. They always wanted to talk about slavery, and I was like, we have a unique situation. But then I really started studying and started realizing that every single person with brown skin was not brought over here in the Middle Passage. And I'm convinced of that. Basically, I'm not really an academic scholar, but I will try to give credit to any of the research, the people who have actually done the work. I read other people's work. I remember my most recent time in college, one of my professors, I was thinking, I'm going to get me a doctorate, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I couldn't get past the first couple of years, first couple of semesters, because I felt like these people wanted me to just swallow what they were saying, and I said, I came to get an education, and if getting an education is just taking your word for it, I guess I'm going to have to get up out of here. And I think that a lot of times, right now, I think when it comes down to credentials, the credentials that people have, I'm looking at all the different people and the people who have credentials to be priests, and we see in the news that priests they like touching little boys. And then saw this other guy around here. I don't know if he was around here, but whatever. He was a well, for lack of a better term, since this is an audio program, African American or black. He may have actually been an African from some country who was Catholic priest in a white parish. And I'm just using these terms because, for lack of a better term, at least you'll know what I'm talking about. If I try to get too deep, nobody will know what I'm talking about. So okay, here's this black Catholic, and so he's in a parish, and these people let him around their children, and he focuses in on a little girl. So I'm saying, what is with these people who claim they want to be serving the Lord? And the truth is, if I hadn't had my issues with alcohol or whatever, I would have been a preacher a long time ago. But I wanted to try to be honest. I said, until we get this thing straight, I'm going to try to be sincere. I'm not going to go in, but you know what? When you have a calling on your life, you can't really get away from it. And one of the things that I want to get into is that calling. The title of this particular program is The Bible in History. There's a couple of things that need to be reconciled. So my ministry is a ministry of reconciliation. I want to deal with, number one, the white folks that died with us. Or when I say us, I'm going to say my ancestors or my predecessors, or the people that marched with the civil rights marchers, the people who rode the bus who subjected themselves and put themselves in harm's way, the people who helped on the Underground Railroad. I have to have a great deal of respect for individuals like that, because in a time when it wasn't popular to be nice to people whose names and cultures were stripped. And that's why I said, why of all the people, when they brought, when they had the Chinese people working on the railroad, they didn't strip them. Why? Because that wasn't slavery. What was that? I don't know what that was. That was, they wanted to work, they were willing to work, they built the railroad out west, but they maintained their culture. Why was it so important to strip the people who came on that middle passage? Why was it so important? And I think studying the Bible we can find out, because they didn't want those people, and I'm going to say those people because they lived then. They didn't want them to read, they wanted them to work, and they did everything they could to try to create fear in their hearts and their minds. And the people who were born here, they, who had tribal affiliation and maintained their tribal affiliation, if they weren't wiped out completely, then then they have a reservation. See, so if they were able to survive the killings and the massacres and the holocausts, and this is important because we have a group of individuals, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more in depth as I begin to develop, begin to plan. This here is just live, unscripted, just trying this out. I want to see how this sounds. I want to see what's going on. But, yeah, I'm going to live out this fantasy. I have the technology. And I'm just going to, I was actually looking for something where I could broadcast live. If I had the opportunity, if somebody said, hey, I want you to start this radio show. And I remember some people, when I used to drink and go into bars and stuff, and I'd get to going. Once I got juiced up, man, I really wanted to start to talking. I really wanted to get deep and intellectual. And these people were not interested in all my intellectualism. So I might start telling some jokes or whatever, and found out, hey, people buy you a drink or whatever. But then I had to really get serious and say, I've been wasting a lot of time. I'm not really serving the Lord. I'm sitting up here. Everybody thinks I'm a joke. Everybody thinks that this is a joke. It's not a joke. 1980, I prayed to God. I said, look. Well, I didn't say look. I said, oh God, I know you exist. All I want is the truth. Because I wasn't raised in a church. I didn't know anything about church. As a matter of fact, I didn't even understand what was going on in this world, period. With me, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was studying accounting because it was first on the list. I said, that's good enough. I was like, there was something wrong with my mind, my brain. I'm going to say my brain, not my mind. Because the mind is that, that ethereal place where thoughts interact with the chemical processes of our brain. These passing thoughts come and we happen to look at that thought, and then that thought comes down into our brain and starts to interact with our central nervous system. I mean, that's my philosophy, that's my theory. But look at this. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I could have went to Brown University, I could have went to Hampton, but I had some issues, and I didn't know I had issues. I just thought, I was just trying my best to fit in, trying my best to do whatever. So I have this little prayer, and I pray to God, and next thing, I'm talking about, it happened so fast, I was ready to say do-over. This guy comes knocking on my door, and he was from Campus Crusade for Christ. I didn't know what a crusade was, by the way, at that time. I just said, okay, fine, Campus Crusade. So he comes knocking on the door, and he wants to tell me about Jesus. Now, he's looking like that picture on the wall of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. In a way, he kind of reminded me of that. That's how my memory serves me. And I said, oh, come on, God, are you for real? Okay, so if this is the truth, why is he coming? Was it coincidental? Well, there's no such thing as coincidence. I believe that there are invisible beings, angels, if you will. I believe God looks in on the situation. He's omnipotent, so he already knows. And I really do believe the part where it says he chose us in him before the foundation of the world. And I'm just going to say right now, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. But the foolish son brings shame to the father. And for all the people who may have ever seen me do anything stupid or whatever, if you happen to be listening, I apologize. And if you let me know, I'll try to make amends, except where to do so, is going to injure you or others or whatever. But the whole idea is this. I'm living. I survived it. I'm coming back to sanity here. And I just have to realize that I'm just one of those people who just cannot use any kind of substances at all. Socially acceptable, whatever. If you can, I just have to be, just like regular. And I got to watch my diet, and I got to exercise. I got to stay on top. I got to be vigilant. And I got to stay on top of this thing, because I really believe that right now I'm the righteousness of God. What does that mean? I'm going to get into a little bit more detail, and I'm going to use the Bible, and I'm going to also make references to some history. I'm going to be writing, and use writing as a tool to organize my thinking. I'm not a very organized person, and I think that's just a brain thing. That's like my brain. And as I proceed, I believe as time goes on, I'm going to get a little bit more organized. As the brain itself, as my brain gets a little bit healthier, but I'm going to rely upon the Spirit of God, because I believe the Spirit of God can actually take me further than my brain could anyway, because I believe the part of in 1 Corinthians, I believe it is. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I got to get into this. I got to get my other stuff going on here, so I can refer to it. I use eSword as far as Bible software, so that I have all these different reference, so I can make references to the different versions of the Bible. As far as the outline of the Bible, we're going to use, and as far as history is concerned, we know that in 1604, anybody that's any kind of Bible student, I'm going to have I'll have a beginner's class, or beginner's show, I should say, beginner's podcast, because I've got so much going on that I got to sort of sort through, deal with the things that are kind of like pressing. Then I got to get into some other stuff. So, but looking at the outline, we're talking about 1604, okay? And in 1604, that's when the King James Bible comes in. Okay, and this is important because we got to think about in terms of history. What was happening in 1604? We already know that the slave trade was underway. These people, when they start talking about 1492, oh my goodness, wait a minute, hold up. You mean to tell me that after, in 1493, when the Spanish, because of Isabella and Ferdinand, they got married, and so they joined forces and they drove the Moors out of Spain. This is very important, because when we start talking about Hispanic, Latino, when people start making references to their Spanish heritage, and they look like they were born, or they look like they originate from this hemisphere. They don't look white, because Spanish people were white people. And I'm going to use the term not in a derogatory way, but that's what they were. They were Europeans. Now, they were near Gibraltar. Of course, there was some interaction. So when you get any type of, we know that the Spanish borrowed their caste system from the Hindus, and that meant that it was a color-coded system. Now, we know whenever we hear the word color, when they start talking about skin color and color, we know that that reference is false. There's no such thing as black people. There's no such thing as white people. Black and white refers to legal status, and we're going to deal with that, how that relates to the census, the United States Federal Census Bureau. They want to know, they are bean counters. They're jelly bean counters. They're sociologists, social engineers. They want to know what color you are. How do you identify yourself? So I don't check off black anymore. You know, you look at me. I remember years ago, or I talk on the phone, and they say, "Oh, when I come in for the job interview or whatever, you look so different than you sound on the phone." Now, we all know what that means. Okay, come on. But, you know, I've got to be gracious, because, you know, God's given me His Holy Spirit, and I believe that I'm an ambassador for Christ. We know for a fact that Jesus Christ, the historical Jesus Christ, was not European. How do we know that? We know that because the New Testament tells us that he and his whole family fled to Egypt. Now, how are you going to hide in Egypt if you're European? You're European, so we already know that. You talk about old little town of Bethlehem and all the little Christmas carols, and we start saying, okay, well, I want to know, who were the real Christians? Will the real European Christians stand up? We know that the Roman Catholics, they weren't Christian. Why? Because Romans never got converted. They never received the Holy Spirit. We know that the inquisitors, the bishops of Rome, they were not Christians. They were just heathens who used used the Bible? What were they using? They tried to claim that Jesus died and left them boss. That's what they tried. They're trying to claim apostolic authority. Well, if you have apostolic authority, why would you call your people Pope? Okay, Pope actually would have been pronounced Papa. So when Biggie Small starts talking about, oh, I love it when they call me Big Papa, I get a chuckle out of that because it's an interesting word. And when you do some word studies, you really develop a deeper sense of humor because you hear people saying things and sometimes you wonder if they even know what they're talking about. And I guess people probably say the same thing about me. Do you know what you're talking about? Do you know what you're talking about? Like the Ethiopian in Book of Acts, where here comes Peter. Peter comes and says to him, do you know what you're reading? Now, Ethiopia, we know in Bible terms, that's letting you know that person has dark, put it this way. If that Ethiopian had been sitting on the bus, he'd have been sitting on the back of the bus. Can I get a witness? Because the truth is this, in the Bible, you don't see black and white. You see ethnicity and nationality. So, and if we go back and look into Genesis, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more detail, I'm just so excited to just be able to just do this. This is cool, man. I'm having a ball. But anyway, when I get into this thing and start going through the whole Bible, I'm going to go through the whole Bible. We're just going to read and I'm going to comment because I used to watch this guy, The Shepherd's Chapel. And I used to love him because the guy, he reminded me, I don't want to talk about Alan, but he just reminded me of put it this way, I don't think he believed in interracial marriage, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's interesting to watch people who really do study, and I learn so much from individuals, and it just causes me to study more and more. But I do know for a fact, from my studies, that the Ashkenaz were the Nazis, Aryan Nazis, who claimed to be Jews. And we need to understand that these Germanic tribes, as they swept across Europe and they moved westward, they wanted to pretty much control everything. And they wanted to use the Bible. They wanted to take on an identity as God's chosen people. And that's when you start getting into Europe, because at the time, Europa is interesting because Europa also is, it is one of the satellites. One of the satellites of one of the. When we start talking about it, it's the sixth closest moon of the planet Jupiter. Now you got to get into Greek mythology. You got to get into Roman mythology to understand where the planets get their names. And then also when you start talking about Europa and Europe with an E, then we understand Pope with an E. So when we see Europa with an A, you're talking about the sixth closest moon of the planet Jupiter. Alright? And so it's an icy moon. And this is interesting because when you start talking about some cold-blooded people, if people say that, the Superman thing, or Nietzsche and all these individuals, when you start reading their stuff and start thinking how these people thought, you say, look, let's get something straight. Germans truly do have a very accurate, precise way of thinking. So we owe a lot of scientific discoveries to them. We also know that during the time of the German concentration camps. The Nazi scientists, Gray's Anatomy, come on, where do you think they got all that knowledge? They were dissecting people. And when you start talking about aliens, if there is such a thing as aliens, I mean, Jesus said, he says, my kingdom's not of this world. I'm like, all right, what you trying to say, brother? If we go into the Dogon and they start talking about Sirius, I got to get doggone serious, man. Because we do know that long before any civilization arose in Europe, there were civilizations thriving, not only in Mesopotamia, China, Egypt, not to mention over here where they call the New World. And when I get into some more of the going along with the Bible history, especially when we start looking at the parallels, if these people had the gospel of Christ, and somebody wants to say that the Crusades was somehow inspired by the teachings of Christ, I'm sorry, I don't see it. It doesn't change who God is. It doesn't change who Jesus is, because the fact remains, when Paul says we should know Christ after the flesh, remember, Paul had dark skin. Why? Why do we know that? Because he was mistaken for an Egyptian. You got to study all his writings to get this. He's got like 14 sections of the New Testament. So all of this comes from people who would have had to sit on the back of the bus. It's been hijacked, taken over, and so we of all people. Now, if anybody wanted to know why do so-called black people get treated very, very badly in this world? Why? Because God expects them to repent, and we of all people need to believe on Jesus, because he was not white. He was not European. And that's the truth. They tried to hide that, and that's why when they took Judah, when they took them, and if we got to go, we're going to go into Deuteronomy and everything. When they took Judah and put them on them slave ships and brought them here, the first thing they said is, well, we're going to have to strip them of their, and of course they came from different nations. They had different nations, tribes, and tongues. Of course they did. But why? Because they did not want them to get unified. So when the African American, who knows nothing about Africa, the Negro, the so-called black, when they get this thing straight and understand that if you would have been sitting on the back of the bus, if you'd have been sitting on the back of the bus back in when was the last back of the bus stuff happening? In the 50s? Let's just say in the 50s. If in the 50s you'd have been sitting on the back of the bus, because we know that when they had the Montgomery bus boycott was behind, you got to sit in the back of the bus. Are you kidding me? So, okay. So we get over that, and then we say, all right, we don't want to stir up what? Hornet's nest? Bees hive? A beehive? What? People with stingers? What? Wasps? What? White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That's what they used to call them, right? But if you understand what a wasp is a parasite. So that means that if you got to understand, the only reason the Protestants came out was because they were against the popes, who originated where? In Rome, which was where? Italy. And if you understand to this day why the Sicilian mafia and the American mafia, how they are usually Roman Catholic. Why? Because they learned something, and they said, look, none of you people have authority. We're going to do what we want to do. And you don't want to get involved with them, because they'll kill you, but so will the police. They'll kill you. So will the army. So will the unmanned drones. There's a lot of people out here that will kill you if you are killable. Now, what does that mean, if you're killable? Everybody's not killable. When a man's ways please the Lord, let me tell you, when you dwell in a secret place, you're not killable. God has you here for a reason. So, but there's some people, extras get killed. Anybody ever watch Star Trek? Let me tell you something. If you saw a brother in the away team, you best believe he's dying. He's not making it back to the ship. That's all there is to it. Of course, some of the other away team members would die, so it wasn't a racial thing. But the only way you were coming back is you would have had to been Worf, or you would have had to been, who else? You would have had to be some of the later guys who were, of course, they had to be aliens. They couldn't look normal. You'd have had to been like Geordi, LeVar Burton. They had to put something on his eyes because they just said, man, your eyes are just too big. We got to put this visor. This is the character for you. Okay? If you talk about, look at, so the brothers had to be aliens, and then they had to be like in this supporting role. The guy, Avery Brooks, remember he used to play Hawk. Oh man, he was the only guy that was allowed to look normal. Him and his son on Deep Space Nine. Now remember, Deep Space Nine didn't have no weapons. Man, they had the brother on the space station, and he had to use his wits. All those aliens from all them different places all up in the space station, they had to have a brother running that to keep everybody in line. But at least they let him look like a normal person and let his son look like a normal person. Of course, he couldn't have a wife. He had to be like a single parent. But that's cool. Deep Space Nine, it was pretty cool. But how'd I get way out there? Why? Because we're on this planet, and there's some very interesting things going on this planet. One thing's for sure, when we die, there is a life of the soul. What does that mean? Jesus talks about that when I get into the gospel. I got like 3 minutes left, so let me just wrap this up. I rambled for about 26 minutes. This is my first show unplanned. I couldn't wait. I just wanted to ramble. I call it the Bible in history. That was kind of like an overview. Yes, the Bible is not a history book, but it does have doctrine. And one of the most important things to ask is, if a person really believes what the Bible says, how could they possibly be racist? How could they possibly, first of all, how could they possibly, in light of the fact that Ethiopia, Egypt, all those places are the first places mentioned. Nothing European is mentioned in the Old Testament. But yet, these individuals want to take over everything, and nowadays they don't even bother. They don't even bother with morality. They want to access your children. Why would the world would the education Department of Education believe that they should be teaching children anything about sex long before puberty? That's not their responsibility. Teach them how to read, teach them how to write, teach them how to do math, teach them how to communicate and get a job or whatever. That's it. But as far as this indoctrination, that's the nationality. The indoctrination. What is this indoctrination? It is the nationality of the United States, where it's a corporation nation. They can only deal with you mentally. They cannot deal with you physically, because physically we are souls. We have inalienable rights that are given to us by our Creator. And I'm telling you right now, this is what I'm all about. Jesus said the truth will make you free, so I'm all about the truth. And I'm going to tell you, hey, Julian Assange, he's got a pretty good house arrest deal. But he wanted to reveal what they were doing. Permission to engage, permission for a helicopter people to shoot down unarmed people. What in the world kind of military? That's worse than the Vietnam War. But more about that when I get myself a little bit more organized. I want to thank anybody who's happened to be listening. Please let me know that you happen to hear me rant today. I should have called this one a rant. But please let me know through I'm at Leroy Green on Twitter and LD Green Jr. on Facebook. And then we'll see. Until next time, try to keep it real and be blessed.